The telegram felt heavy in my hand, a flimsy piece of paper that held the weight of my shattered future. It was from Liam Chin. The words were bureaucratic and cold, but their meaning was searingly clear. His application to return to the city had been approved. The family was granted 2 slots. They had been assigned to his younger sister, Maya Chin, and to Isabella Rossi, the daughter of his former professor. Lena Song, his fiancée, was the one left behind. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. I stood frozen in the dusty yard of our rural commune, the midday sun beating down on my bowed head. This was it. The moment I had lived before, the moment that had broken me in a past life I alone remembered. In that other lifetime, Liam had found me after he got the news. He had taken my hands, his handsome face a mask of pained tenderness. "Lena," he had said, his voice low and convincing, "my marriage with Isabella is just a formality. You know how fragile her health is. Her father entrusted her to me. It's my duty to see her settled in the city. Just wait for me a little longer. Once I find my footing, I'll send for you. I promise." And I, a fool in love, drenched in the sweat and soil of a life I never chose, had believed him. I had waited. I had waited through seasons of backbreaking labor, through lonely nights, through the hollow ache in my heart. I had waited until the day I had gone to the supply co-op for salt and saw them there, huddled together in the medicine aisle, their heads close, discussing which contraceptives to buy. The world had tilted on its axis then, the foundation of my trust crumbling into dust. The memory was a fresh wound even now. The casual intimacy of their posture, the practical planning for a future that explicitly excluded me. The betrayal was a poison that had seeped into my bones, and even in this new chance at life the ache remained. I didn't have to wait long for the performance to begin. As if summoned by my grim thoughts, Liam appeared at the gate, Maya fluttering at his heels like an agitated sparrow, and Isabella trailing behind him, a picture of delicate weakness leaning slightly on his arm for support. "Lena," Liam began, his voice already adopting that familiar, placating tone. He ran a hand through his thick dark hair, his brow furrowing in a show of distress. "I know what you must be thinking. But you have to understand this situation with Isabella. It's not what it seems. She's unwell. She needs the city's doctors. This marriage, it's just a piece of paper. A necessary deception. I need you to be strong. Wait for me. Just a little while longer and I swear I will come back for you." He reached for me, but I took a sharp step back, my movement causing a small cloud of dust to rise between us. I curved my lips into a cold, brittle smile that didn't reach my eyes. The words that had once been my lifeline now sounded like the hollow lies they were. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I won't wait anymore." The effect was immediate. Liam recoiled as if struck. The rehearsed speech died on his lips, and his handsome features contorted in genuine shock. "Lena? What do you mean?" My gaze swept past him, calmly taking in the trio. Isabella, with her large doe-like eyes already glistening with unshed tears, her slender frame seeming to tremble slightly in the breeze. Maya, her face a mask of open impatience and spoiled entitlement, her arms crossed over her chest. "Since the quota was given to them," I said, my tone flat and final, "then let them go live their lives. I won't be a part of this charade." In my past life, that look of pained tenderness on Liam's face had unraveled me completely. Now I saw it for what it was, a tool of manipulation. I remembered the cruel surprise that awaited me after years of waiting, the discovery that he and Isabella not only had a real marriage but a child together. The image of that small dark-haired boy who looked just like Liam was seared into my memory. That betrayal was carved into my soul, and remembering it now fortified my resolve, sealing the cracks in my heart. "How can you speak to my brother like that?" Maya was the first to lash out, just as I knew she would. At 16, she was the embodiment of spoiled arrogance, having always treated me more like a household servant than a future sister-in-law. "Isabella's health is poor. Of course, Liam has to take care of her. You're just a farm girl. You should be grateful someone like my brother even looked your way. And now you have the nerve to complain about the quota." Yes, I was from the countryside. An orphan with no family name to speak of. To everyone in this village, my engagement to a promising, educated man like Liam Chen was a stroke of unimaginable good fortune. A Cinderella story where I should have been eternally grateful for the glass slipper, no matter how poorly it fit. Isabella chose that moment to flutter her eyelashes and tug lightly at Liam's sleeve. "Liam, it's all my fault," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread of sound. "If I weren't so sickly, Lena wouldn't be so upset. Perhaps you should let her go instead." "I don't mind." She lowered her head, her shoulders trembling in a perfect imitation of pitiable sorrow. In my previous life, this very act had never failed to soften Liam's heart and paint me as the unreasonable, jealous harpy. Sure enough, he patted her hand comfortingly. "Don't say such things, Isabella. It's not your fault." When he turned back to me, his voice had hardened with reproach. "Lena, can't you see she's trying to yield for our sake? How can you be so thoughtless? I told you it's temporary. Just endure it until I get established. Is that so hard?" Endure. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. "No. There's no need." I didn't wait for his reply. I turned on my heel and walked straight into the small, spare room I occupied in the Chin household. I went to the old, scarred wooden cabinet and from its innermost drawer, I pulled out my savings. A crumpled 10-yuan note and a handful of smaller change. Every cent I had scraped together, hoarded with the dream of a wedding, of a future. In my last life, Liam had taken this very money, claiming he needed it to smooth the way in the city. I had never seen a penny of it again. Now I bundled the money securely, then gathered the few belongings I had. A spare tunic, a pair of patched trousers, a hair comb that had belonged to my mother. It all fit into a small, faded cloth bundle. I slung it over my shoulder and walked out of the room, out of the house that had never truly been my home. "Lena, stop this nonsense. Where do you think you're going?" Liam's voice was sharp with anger and confusion from behind me. I didn't answer. I kept walking, my steps firm and determined, heading for the gate. But before I could reach it, I nearly collided with Uncle Feng, the village chief, who was hurrying in, his face beaming, a document stamped with an official red seal clutched in his hand. "Lena. Good news. Liam's quota." He stopped short, his smile vanishing as he took in the bundle on my back and the resolute set of my shoulders. "What's going on? Liam, what are you two quarreling about now?" I didn't correct his assumption. I simply moved to brush past him. Uncle Feng, a kind, weathered man in his 50s, hurried after me, blocking my path with a concerned expression. "Child, what is this? Liam's return to the city is a blessing. Soon you'll both be living a good life there. Why are you fighting at a time like this?" I stopped, seeing the genuine worry in his eyes. A faint warmth stirred in my chest. In this place, aside from the memories of my long-dead parents, Uncle Feng and his wife were the only ones who had ever shown me true kindness. "But I'm not going, Uncle Feng," I said quietly. "The slots were given to Maya Chin and Isabella Rossi. Liam told me to wait, but I don't want to wait anymore." The moment the words left my mouth, his bushy eyebrows furrowed deeply. He glanced back at the three figures standing stiffly by the house and lowered his voice. This is too much. Isabella is one thing. They say she's the professor's daughter, a duty. But Maya? She's just a child. How could they give your slot to her?" Uncle Feng knew the truth of my life here. Liam's parents were gone and he and Maya had survived on the village's charity. As his fiancée, I had been their primary source of support, tending their small private plot, cooking their meals, mending their clothes. And after Isabella had arrived, supposedly to recuperate in the fresh country air, her expenses, her food, her delicate needs, all of it had been sustained by the sweat of my brow, by the food I grew with my own hands. But none of that mattered anymore. The ledger of my sacrifices was closed. "I've decided to go south, Uncle Feng. I'm going to make my own way. There's nothing left for me here." He sighed, a long, weary sound. He knew my temperament. Once my mind was set, no force on earth could drag me back. But to go south alone to a strange place, how will you manage? "I'll find a way," I said, my voice firm. "Uncle Feng, please, could you help me? I need to sell the grain in my storage and the vegetables in my garden. And I'd like you to find someone to sublease my private plot." Asking him to do this was me burning my bridges. It was a final, decisive break. There would be no coming back to a plot of land to farm, no stored grain to see me through the winter. I was cutting myself adrift. Uncle Feng looked at me for a long moment, seeing the unyielding resolve in my eyes. He knew further argument was useless. He gave a slow, heavy nod. "All right, child. I'll take care of it for you. After I said my goodbyes, I didn't look back. I walked away from the Chin household, from Liam, from the life of waiting and betrayal. The path ahead was uncertain and terrifying, but for the first time in either of my lives, it was my path and mine alone. The days that followed were a whirlwind of practical, final actions. I stayed with Uncle Feng and his wife Auntie Lon, who clucked over me with a mixture of worry and admiration. With Uncle Feng's help, I sold my stored grain to the village purchasing station. The amount was pitifully small, a little over 20 yuan, but it felt like a fortune in my hand. It was money I had earned, untainted by false promises. Auntie Lon helped me harvest the last of the vegetables from my garden, bunching onions, spinach, and some sturdy cabbages. She insisted on buying them from me herself, pressing a few extra coins into my palm. "For your journey, child," she said, her eyes soft. "You'll need all the help you can get." Uncle Feng was as good as his word. Within 2 days he had found a young couple new to the village to take over my private plot. The transaction was swift and simple. With that, the last tangible tie I had to this place, to the land that had both sustained and imprisoned me, was severed. I was officially rootless, and the feeling was as liberating as it was frightening. Meanwhile, as I efficiently tied up the loose ends of my old life, the Chin household descended into a chaos that became the talk of the entire village. I had been the invisible engine of that home. I was the one who woke before dawn to light the stove, who cooked the meals, who washed the clothes by the river, who fed the single scrawny pig we kept, and who shouldered the bulk of the work in the fields. Liam, with his educated hands and city aspirations, considered such labor beneath him. Isabella played the part of the perpetually convalescing invalid. And Maya was a spoiled child who had never been taught the meaning of responsibility. Without me, the house fell apart spectacularly and publicly. I heard the stories from Auntie Lon, who relayed them with a certain grim satisfaction. On the very first day they had nearly starved. Isabella had stood helplessly in front of the cold stove, complaining in her delicate, wavering voice that she didn't know how to light a fire. Maya had thrown a tantrum demanding cooked rice. Liam, the great intellectual, had been forced to step into the kitchen, a domain he had rarely entered. The result was a pot of half-scorched, half-uncooked rice that was barely edible. The simple stir-fried greens he attempted were so salty they were inedible. The villagers, who had long watched my unending labor with a mix of pity and silent judgment, now found their schadenfreude. They laughed at the sight of the proud Liam Chin, his face smudged with soot, stumbling through chores a child could manage. They mocked Isabella's helplessness and Maya's entitled fury. The family that had always presented an image of slight superiority was now a spectacle of incompetence. After a few days of this, Maya evidently reached her breaking point. I was in Uncle Feng's courtyard helping Auntie Lon spread rice to dry in the sun, when Maya stormed in, her face flushed with anger. "Lena Song," she shrieked, her voice cutting through the peaceful morning. "You will come back with me this instant. Do you have any idea what a mess the house is? There's no proper food, the clothes are filthy, it's a pigsty. My brother said if you come back and do your chores properly, he might still consider bringing you to the city once he's settled." I didn't even look up from the rake I was using to spread the grains. Her words, so arrogantly delivered, bounced off me. They held no power anymore. Seeing that I was ignoring her, her anger boiled over. "Are you deaf? Don't be so ungrateful. My brother choosing you was the biggest stroke of luck you'll ever have. And now Isabella is even willing to give up her spot for you, and you still don't appreciate it." At that, I set the rake down carefully and met her furious gaze. I let out a cold, sharp laugh that made her blink. "Maya, I can't afford your brother's so-called luck. As for Isabella giving up her slot, if she were truly that kind, my name would be on that document right now, not hers." The truth of my statement struck her speechless. Her mouth opened and closed, her face flushing a blotchy, bright red. Just then, as if on cue, Isabella arrived, leaning against the gatepost of Uncle Feng's yard, putting on her signature frail, boneless act. "Maya, stop it," she said, giving a light, pathetic cough. "Lena, I know you're angry. It's all my fault. Liam, he has no choice." As she spoke, her eyes welled up with perfectly timed tears. I looked at her, and a memory, sharp and vicious, flashed in my mind. Liam and Isabella in the co-op, their heads bent over a box of contraceptives, discussing their options in low, intimate tones. In this life they hadn't registered their marriage yet, but some things I was sure had already begun. A dark, cynical thought stirred within me. I turned my attention back to the fuming Maya. You know, Maya, I said, my voice deceptively calm, your brother and your sister, Isabella, seem exceptionally close. Once you all get to the city, the three of you should live happily as one big family. I just wonder if your brother's meager salary will be enough to support two such delicate young ladies. I paused, letting my gaze drift meaningfully to Isabella's waist. And who knows? Perhaps soon it won't be just two mouths to feed. Maya, in her youthful naivety, didn't catch my implication. But Isabella did. Her face, already pale, lost all remaining color. The hand that was gripping the doorframe tightened until her knuckles were white. The tears in her eyes seemed to freeze, replaced by a flicker of sheer panic. Maya was still shouting, "My brother is capable. Of course he can give us a good life. Unlike you, who can only stay in the countryside and farm." Uncle Feng, who had been listening from the doorway, his expression growing darker by the second, finally had enough. He stepped forward, his kind face now set in stern lines. "You little girl," he boomed, his voice silencing Maya's tirade. "How dare you say Lena only knows how to farm? If she didn't farm, who fed you? Who clothed you? The lot of you are lazy and useless, living off her hard work as if she were your servant. And now you have the nerve to look down on her." He pointed a thick, calloused finger toward the gate. "Enough. Go home. Lena has made her decision. More talk is useless." Maya, who had never been scolded so harshly by anyone, let alone the village chief, was utterly humiliated. Her face was a beacon of red, and though she looked like she wanted to argue, Uncle Feng's authoritative glare made her shrink back. Isabella felt the humiliation even more keenly. She had been deeply unsettled by my earlier veiled accusation, and now she was terrified I would say something even more damning. "Maya, let's go," she whispered, her voice trembling with a real fear this time. Without waiting for Maya's agreement, she practically dragged the sputtering girl away, their retreat a picture of disgrace. Watching them go, I felt nothing. No triumph, no anger, no satisfaction. Just a vast, calm emptiness. They were already part of a past I was determined to leave behind. Uncle Feng turned to me, his expression softening. "You see what they're like, child. You're well rid of them." I nodded. "I know, Uncle Feng. Thank you." The confrontation had only solidified my resolve. This nest of vipers I had called home was scrambling without its primary caretaker, and I felt not a single ounce of responsibility for their plight. They had made their choices and I had finally made mine. My path led south, away from this drama, away from this village. My future was a blank page and I was ready to write the first word. The morning I was to leave, a fine mist clung to the mountains, softening the harsh outlines of the village I was leaving behind. Auntie Lon had packed me a lunch of steamed buns and pickled vegetables, her eyes red-rimmed. Uncle Feng pressed a small folded stack of yuan into my hand. "For an emergency," he said, his voice gruff. "Don't argue." I didn't. The weight of their kindness was a comforting anchor in the sea of my uncertainty. I shouldered my small bundle, now containing my meager savings and the few coins from my sales, and set off before the sun had fully burned through the fog. I took the back path, the narrow valley trail that wound behind the mountain, ensuring I wouldn't cross paths with Liam and his group at the village entrance. I imagined them standing there under the rising sun, growing increasingly impatient, waiting for money I would never bring. The thought brought a grim smile to my lips. Let them stew in their own frustration. It was no longer my concern. The trail was steep and rugged, used only by hunters and herb gatherers. Thorns snagged my trousers and my breath came in sharp pants as I climbed. But with every step I felt a layer of the past sloughing off. The air was clean and sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth. It was a physical purging, this journey away from the life that had stifled me. By the time I reached the county bus station, the sun was high and hot. My body ached, but my spirit felt lighter than it had in years. The station was a chaotic symphony of noise and movement. Buses belching black smoke, porters shouting, families clinging to bundles as large as haystacks. I bought a ticket to the provincial capital with cash from my savings, clutching the precious slip of paper as if it were a lifeline. The bus ride was long and bone-jarring, the hard seat vibrating beneath me. I stared out the window, watching the familiar terraced fields and clustered villages give way to flatter, more industrial landscapes. This was it. I was truly gone. From the provincial capital, I transferred to a southbound train. The noise and scale of the train station were overwhelming. A river of humanity surged through the vast hall, a cacophony of dialects and announcements I could barely understand. When I finally found my carriage and squeezed onto a hard wooden seat, I was trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. As the train lurched into motion, I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching the world rush by in a blur. The emotions I had held at bay finally swamped me. In my previous life, I had also watched Liam leave, my heart full of a desperate, foolish hope. I had stood on a platform much like this one, waving until his train was a speck in the distance, believing his promises, building castles in the air that were destined to collapse. That life of waiting had ended in nothing but bitter ashes. I remembered the glimpses I'd caught of the world beyond our village. On the rare, flickering television in the village committee hall, I had seen images of towering buildings that scraped the sky, of confident men and women striding down wide avenues in clothes that spoke of a different, vibrant life. Back then I had wondered, a secret, shameful thought. If I hadn't been trapped, if I hadn't pinned all my hopes and identity on Liam Chin, could I have been one of them? Could I have walked with that same purpose? Now the chance was here. It was terrifying, but it was mine. The city I arrived in after days of travel was a shock to the system. The air itself was different, thick with the smells of exhaust, frying food, and unidentifiable industrial odors. The noise was a constant, roaring presence. People everywhere moved with a hurried intensity one had never seen. I felt small, anonymous, and utterly lost. With the little money I had left, I rented the cheapest room I could find in a crowded urban village, a warren of narrow alleys and tightly packed, dilapidated buildings that housed a floating population of migrants like myself. My room was a single cubicle, just large enough for a narrow bed and a small stool, with a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. The shared bathroom was at the end of the hall, a perpetually damp and foul-smelling place. But it was mine. The struggle began immediately. By day I searched for any work I could find. I took jobs washing dishes in greasy kitchens, hauling crates in bustling markets, cleaning floors in office buildings after hours. The work was dirty, tiring, and paid a pittance. My hands, already calloused from farm work, grew raw and chapped. At night, too exhausted to sleep, I would set up a small stall on the edge of a bustling night market. I sold the few local specialties I had brought from home, dried mushrooms, wild herbs, and little trinkets I had woven from wheat straw in the evenings, a skill Auntie Lon had taught me. The income was meager, barely covering my rent and a daily bowl of noodles. The hardest part wasn't the physical hardship. I was used to that. It was the profound, gut-wrenching loneliness. In this teeming city of millions, I was utterly alone. I had no one to talk to, no one who knew my name, no one who cared if I lived or died. At night, in the silence of my tiny room, I would think of Uncle Fong and Auntie Lon, of the familiar, if painful, contours of my mountain village. A wave of homesickness would wash over me, so strong it felt like a physical illness. But then I would remember Liam's deceitful eyes, Isabella's triumphant smirk, and the cold surprise of that contraceptive box. I would straighten my back on the thin mattress. I couldn't lose. I couldn't go back. I couldn't let them be right about me. It was during this time of desperate survival that I met Alexander Reed. Alex, to the few who knew him. He taught a middle school literature class at a night school not far from the night market where I hawked my wares. One evening, a cry of "Chingguan!" The city inspectors ripped through the market. Panic erupted. Stall owners scrambled to gather their goods and flee. In the chaos, my small stall was knocked over, my carefully arranged mushrooms and woven baskets scattering across the dirty pavement, trampled by fleeing feet. I dropped to my knees, frantically trying to salvage what I could, my vision blurring with hot, helpless tears. This was my livelihood crushed in an instant. The other vendors, concerned with their own survival, rushed past without a second glance. But then a pair of worn but clean leather shoes stopped beside me. I looked up to see a man quietly kneeling down and helping me gather my scattered belongings. He wore a faded blue shirt, its collar neatly pressed, and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses that sat slightly askew on his nose. He had a gentle, scholarly air, but his hands were capable as he carefully brushed the dirt off my mushrooms and placed them back in their baskets. "Miss," he said, his voice calm and low. "Are you all right?" I could only shake my head, too embarrassed and upset to speak. I muttered a thanks, my face burning. After that, he would sometimes stop by my stall. Sometimes he would buy a small bundle of herbs or one of the simpler wheat straw trinkets. Other times he would just stand and chat for a few minutes. He never offered pity, only a quiet, steady presence. I learned that his situation wasn't much better than mine. He was from a small town himself, working in the city alone to support his elderly grandmother back home. The night school job was poorly paid, but it was stable. He told me the night school was full of people like me, people who had come from the countryside with little education but a fierce desire to change their fate. "Lena," he said one evening, his eyes earnest behind his glasses, "this is a good era. It's the time of reform and opening up. If you have knowledge, you can seize opportunities. You should consider attending a class." I hesitated. My formal education had ended after elementary school. The thought of sitting in a classroom was intimidating, and the tuition, however small, was a burden I could barely shoulder. He seemed to sense my concerns. "You can save up slowly for the tuition," he said with an encouraging smile. "In the meantime, I can lend you some textbooks. As long as you want to learn, it's never too late." His words planted a seed in the barren soil of my exhaustion. Knowledge. It was a currency I had never possessed. With his quiet encouragement, I finally enrolled in the most basic literacy class at the night school. I started from the very beginning, relearning pinyin and simple characters, my hand clumsy around the pencil. Alexander Reed, Alex, became my teacher and, gradually, my only friend in that vast, indifferent city. He was patient, answering my endless questions without condescension. He told me stories about history and literature, opening windows to worlds I never knew existed. He encouraged me never to give up, to see my struggle not as a failure but as a foundation. Little by little, the characters stopped being mysterious squiggles and began to form words, then sentences. I could finally read a newspaper, my lips moving silently, piecing together the meaning of current events. I started trying to read simple business books Alex brought me. Most of it was still far beyond my understanding, a fog of unfamiliar terms and concepts, but I kept at it, doggedly, stubbornly. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something, starting with the very bedrock of knowledge. The night school became my sanctuary. In that brightly lit classroom, surrounded by other migrants with tired eyes and determined hearts, I wasn't just Lena the orphan, Lena the abandoned fiancée, or Lena the struggling street vendor. I was a student. The scratch of my pencil on paper was the sound of my own liberation. Alex was a different person in the classroom. The slight shyness I saw at my stall vanished, replaced by a passionate, engaging teacher who brought stories and characters to life. He made learning feel not like a chore but a privilege. After class, he would often walk me back toward the warren of alleys that led to my room, our conversations stretching under the hazy glow of the city's streetlights. He never tried to cross the boundary into my personal space. His presence was always respectful, a steady anchor in my turbulent new life. One evening, as I was painstakingly reading a week-old newspaper he had given me, a piece of news caught my eye. The Canton Fair, a massive trade exhibition, was about to be held in a nearby city. The article described it as a gathering point for thousands of foreign buyers from all over the world. My heart gave a sudden hard thump. A bold, almost ludicrous idea began to form in my mind. The quality of my local specialties was good, far better than the bland, commercially grown produce I saw in the city markets. If I could somehow get them in front of these foreign buyers, the potential profit was staggering, unimaginable compared to the coins I earned at the night market. I brought the idea to Alex the next day, my words tumbling out in an excited rush. He listened intently, his brow furrowed in thought. "It's a tremendous opportunity, Lena," he said finally. "But the scale of the Canton Fair, it's immense. It's not a night market. Getting in, getting noticed, it would be very difficult. But not impossible?" I pressed, my hope a fragile thing. A slow smile spread across his face. "No," he said. "Not impossible. But we would need a strategy." "We?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Of course," he said as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You'll need someone who can stumble through a bit of English, and I have a few days of leave coming." The "we" echoed in my chest, warming a place that had been cold for so long. I wasn't alone in this gamble. The scale of the Canton Fair, when we arrived by a crowded, slow train, was beyond anything I could have conceived. The exhibition hall was a sprawling, modern palace of glass and steel, buzzing with an energy that was both exhilarating and intimidating. Merchants from every corner of the globe moved through the aisles, a riot of different faces, languages, and styles of dress. The sheer variety of goods on display was dazzling, from intricate electronics to bolts of shimmering silk. We didn't have a booth, of course. We were nobodies. So we lingered outside the main halls, seizing any chance to approach passing buyers with our small samples of mushrooms and black fungus. It was demoralizing work. Most people brushed past us without a second look, their eyes glazed over, dismissing us as just another pair of pesky roadside hawkers. After several days of this, our samples were nearly depleted, and we hadn't secured a single expression of genuine interest. The cost of the trip was eating into my tiny savings, and a crushing sense of failure began to settle over me. I sat on the steps outside the hall, the weight of my foolish ambition pressing down on me. "It's no use, Alex," I murmured close to tears. "We've come all this way for nothing." Alex sat beside me, his gaze fixed on the bustling entrance. "Don't lose heart, Lena," he said softly. "Look." He pointed toward a large, beautifully decorated booth inside the hall that specialized in premium agricultural products. "Their goods are good, but look at their packaging. It's beautiful. Our products are just as good, maybe better, but our presentation, it's too plain. We look like peasants." I sighed. "But we don't have money for fancy packaging." "We don't need fancy," Alex said, his eyes lighting up with an idea. "I remember the little wheat straw baskets you weave. They're beautiful, authentic. Why don't we use them to hold the mushrooms and black fungus? We can tie them with a simple red ribbon, highlight their rustic, natural appeal. That could be our advantage." My spirits lifted instantly. "That's a brilliant idea." That night, in the cheap hostel room we'd rented, I wove more than a dozen delicate, intricate little baskets by the light of a single bare bulb. My fingers, practiced and sure, flew through the familiar motions. Meanwhile, Alex went out and bought red ribbons and some sturdy colored paper. On the paper he wrote in his careful, elegant calligraphy, first in Chinese, then in his best English, "A gift from the Chinese countryside. Natural, organic, pure." The next day, when we displayed our newly dressed-up products, the difference was immediate. The little baskets, with their earthy, handmade charm and the bright pop of the red ribbon, drew curious glances. The bilingual tags gave us an air of legitimacy. We were no longer just sellers. We were purveyors of an authentic experience. Finally, a well-dressed businessman from Hong Kong, a Mr. Wong, stopped in front of us. He examined the mushrooms carefully, smelling their earthy scent, feeling their texture. He asked several questions in heavily accented Cantonese. Alex stumbled through a translation, and I, my heart hammering against my ribs, anxiously filled in the details about where and how they were grown, their superior quality. At last Mr. Wong nodded, a satisfied look on his face. "Your goods are good quality," he said in Mandarin. "The packaging is clever. I'll place an order. 100 pounds of mushrooms, 50 pounds of black fungus, to test the market. If the response is good, we can discuss a long-term arrangement." He handed Alex a business card. I stood there, stunned, as Alex negotiated the final details. When Mr. Wong walked away, I turned to Alex, my eyes wide. We had done it. We had actually done it. That first order was more than a financial lifeline. It was a massive injection of confidence. The profit, when it came, felt like a fortune. I immediately reinvested a portion of it back into sourcing more high-quality products from my home region, working through Uncle Fong. With another portion, I paid for a proper beginner's English class at the night school. The language was a formidable hurdle, the sounds strange and alien in my mouth, but if I wanted to do business in this new, wider world, it was a hurdle I had to cross. Alex supported me quietly through it all, helping me balance my accounts, draft simple English emails to Mr. Wong, and encouraging me when the complexities of grammar and vocabulary felt overwhelming. In that constant side-by-side struggle, our relationship began to subtly shift. The gratitude I felt for him was deepening into something richer, more profound. He was no longer just my teacher or my friend. He was my partner. And I was no longer the helpless girl he had found weeping on a dirty street. I was a businesswoman learning to stand on her own 2 feet. The success of that first order was a pebble that started an avalanche. Mr. Wong's test sale was a success, and a larger, long-term order followed. The rustic packaging, as Alex had predicted, became our unique selling point. I moved my operation from the precarious night market stall to a tiny rented storefront in a bustling wholesale market. It was just a concrete cubicle with a rolling metal shutter, but it was mine. A real business with a fixed address. I painted the sign myself, Lena's Country Goods. I was no longer content to be just a middleman. I began to dream bigger. To control quality and cost, I needed to be involved in the processing. I spent nights hunched over Alex's textbooks, learning about food preservation, drying techniques and quality control. The dream of a small processing factory for farm goods began to take shape in my mind. A place where we could clean, sort and package the products ourselves, ensuring every mushroom and every gram of fungus that left our hands was perfect. I broached the idea with Alex one evening as we were closing the shop. "A factory?" he repeated, his eyebrows rising. He was quiet for a long moment, contemplating the idea. Then a slow, determined smile spread across his face. "It's a bold step, Lena. But it's the right one. I'll help you." He didn't just offer encouragement, he threw himself into the project. He used his research skills to help with market analysis, identifying potential suppliers for simple machinery and contacting packaging distributors. And then one evening he placed a small worn passbook on the table between us. It was his life savings, every yuan he had managed to set aside from his teaching salary to support his grandmother and build a future. "I believe in this," he said simply, his gaze steady on mine. "And I believe in you." Tears pricked my eyes. No one had ever shown that kind of faith in me. Not my parents, who died too young, and certainly not Liam, who had only ever seen me as a convenience. Alex was investing not just his money, but his entire future in my dream. The process of setting up the factory was a relentless, grueling test of our endurance. We found a small, dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of the city that we could afford to rent. Funding was a constant worry. Even with our combined savings, we were operating on a razor's edge. The technology was simple: racks for drying, scales, sealing machines. But sourcing it and learning to use it was a challenge. Labor, sales, distribution, every step was a mountain to climb. Seeing the overwhelming workload, Alex made a decision that left me speechless. He resigned from his stable, if poorly paid, job at the night school. "The factory needs full-time attention," he said when I protested. "And so do you. We're in this together, Lena." All the way. He became the operations manager, handling the daily running of the factory, managing the 2 workers we could afford to hire, and dealing with external contacts and logistics. I focused on what I knew best: product quality, sourcing raw materials, and expanding our market. We were a perfect team, his calm, methodical nature balancing my driven, sometimes impulsive, energy. We were not just business partners. We were each other's strongest support, working from before dawn until late into the night, our lives completely intertwined by shared struggle and ambition. Time passed in a blur of sweat and effort. After more than half a year of relentless work, our small agricultural processing factory, which we named New Dawn Foods, was finally operational. The scale was modest, the equipment basic, but it was clean, organized, and efficient. The products that left our warehouse were of consistently high quality, fairly priced, and beautifully, authentically packaged. Very soon our sales channels widened. Orders began to pour in, first from within the province, then from other major cities. The reputation we had built with Mr. Wong opened doors, and soon we were fielding inquiries from Southeast Asia, and even as far as Japan and Korea. My name, Lena Song, once synonymous with a poor country orphan, began to carry weight in local agricultural trade circles. People started to talk about this tenacious young woman from the countryside who was anything but ordinary. As the business found its footing, my relationship with Alex blossomed naturally in the fertile ground of our shared struggles and triumphs. The long hours together, the quiet dinners over account books, the shared relief when a large order was secured, the unspoken understanding in a glance, it all built something deep and unshakable between us. One rainy evening, after a particularly long day, he walked me back to the small, slightly better apartment I now rented. The neon signs of the city shimmered on the wet streets. In front of my door he suddenly stopped, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a nervous energy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny box of red velvet. My breath hitched. He dropped to one knee on the damp pavement, looking up at me, his glasses slightly fogged, his hair sprinkled with rain. Lena, he began, his voice trembling slightly but his gaze unwavering. I know I don't have much to offer you right now. I can't give you wealth or luxury. But I have a heart that loves you more than anything, and I'm willing to spend the rest of my life working by your side, supporting you and building a family with you. Will you marry me? He opened the box. Inside wasn't a diamond but a simple, elegant gold band. It was perfect. Looking at him, this man who had appeared when I was at my absolute lowest, who had seen my strength and my weaknesses and loved me for all of them, my eyes filled with tears. What he was offering me was something no amount of money could ever buy. True partnership, unwavering respect, and a love that felt like coming home. I nodded, the words catching in my throat before I could force them out. Yes, I finally whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Yes, Alex, I will. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and as he stood to kiss me, the cold rain and the bustling city around us faded into insignificance. I had found my place not just in business but in the heart of a good man. Life after Alex's proposal was a whirlwind of a different kind. We were still consumed by the growing demands of New Dawn Foods, but now our efforts were underscored by a new, joyful purpose. We were building our future together. It was during this time of bustling happiness that I received a call from Uncle Fong. His voice, familiar and warm, crackled down the line, but it held a note of formality. Lena, do you have time to come back to the village for a visit? A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Uncle Fong, is everything all right? He sighed, a sound I could picture perfectly. It's nothing bad. The village elementary school, it's about to be renovated. The county provided some funds, but it's not enough. The village committee, well, we thought we'd invite those who've made achievements outside to come back. Maybe make a donation and also set an example for the children. Share your story. I understood. They wanted me to return as a success story, a local girl made good, to bring honor to the village and, not so subtly, to open my purse strings. To be honest, the place held little affection for me. It was a repository of pain, of betrayal, of a life of servitude. But I couldn't refuse Uncle Fong. His was the only voice from that past that had ever held unconditional kindness. And, if I was completely honest with myself, a small, hardened part of me wanted to go back. I wanted to see the place that had once been my entire world, to walk its paths not as a powerless girl, but as a woman who had carved out her own destiny. I wanted to see how those who had looked down on me, who had hurt me, were faring. As if the universe was aligning to test my resolve, a formal invitation arrived at our factory office a few days later. It was from the university in the regional city, the one Liam had been associated with. They were holding an alumni event for outstanding graduates and were inviting successful individuals from various fields to return and give speeches. To my utter astonishment, my name was on the list. They had heard of Lena Song of New Dawn Foods. I showed the thick embossed paper to Alex. He read it, a thoughtful look on his face. It's the same city, the same time as your village event, he noted. He looked at me, his eyes seeing right through my conflicted emotions. You should go, Lena. I don't know if I want to face all of that, I admitted, the old wounds aching faintly. He took my hand, his thumb stroking the simple gold band on my finger. This isn't about facing them. It's about closing a chapter. You've built a wonderful life. Go back not for revenge but for closure. To let those old wounds finally heal in the sunlight. He smiled. And I'll be right there with you. His words decided it. Yes, I said, feeling a surge of strength. It's time. Alexander and I made the journey together, the train ride now a comfortable experience in a soft-seat carriage, a world away from my first terrified trip south. The familiar mountains came into view, and with them, a flood of complex emotions. The old locust tree at the village entrance was still there, its branches a little barer. The houses seemed smaller, more worn than I remembered. Uncle Fong and a few village officials were waiting for us. The welcome was not grand, but it was heartfelt. Oh, Lena, Uncle Fong said, his eyes misty as he held both my hands, looking me up and down. I was no longer in a patched tunic, but in a well-tailored, simple wool coat. You've truly grown into a fine, capable woman. At the village committee, I publicly donated 50,000 yuan to the school rebuilding fund. The number elicited gasps, then a wave of effusive thanks from the leaders. They arranged a banquet in our honor. The faces in the room were a mix of the familiar and the new. Those who had once mocked me or pitied me now wore wide, flattering smiles, addressing me as Boss Lena, and praising my shrewdness and generosity. The irony was not lost on me, but I felt no bitterness, only a distant sense of pity for their small world. The next day, after finalizing the donation details, Alex and I took a bus to the regional city and the university. The anniversary celebration was a far more polished affair than the village banquet. The auditorium was large and modern, filled with hundreds of students and alumni. As a special guest, I was seated on the main stage. My eyes, almost of their own volition, scanned the crowd. And I found him. Liam. He was sitting farther back, wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit that was visibly worn at the elbows. His hair, once so carefully styled, was messy with threads of gray at the temples I didn't remember. His face, still handsome in a faded way, was etched with deep lines of defeat and a profound weariness. He was staring straight at me, his expression a complicated storm of shock, recognition, and something that looked like regret. I saw no sign of Maya or Isabella beside him. When it was my turn to speak, I walked calmly to the podium. I shared my story, editing out the fantastical truth of my rebirth. I spoke of hardship, of seizing opportunity, of the importance of perseverance and education. I talked about the value of believing in oneself. My words, spoken from a place of hard-won experience, drew genuine, warm applause from the audience. Then a young female student stood up during the Q&A. "Senior Lena," she called out, her voice bright with admiration, "you're so successful and so beautiful. May I ask, are you married? Your partner must be an outstanding person too, right?" The hall rippled with good-natured laughter. I smiled, my eyes instinctively finding Alex in the front row where he sat, watching me with so much warmth and pride it made my heart swell. "Thank you for asking," I said, my voice clear and carrying. "I am engaged." I paused, feeling the weight of Liam's gaze from the back of the room. "My fiancé is here with me today. In fact, besides attending this anniversary, we also came back to our hometown to hold our wedding." The moment the words left my mouth, Liam's body jerked as if he'd been electrocuted. He stared at me, his face a mask of stunned disbelief, his earlier weariness replaced by a raw, painful shock. I ignored him. My fiancé supported me silently at the very start of my journey and has never left my side. Now, I'd like to invite him to come up and meet everyone. The spotlight swung and found Alex. He looked momentarily shy, but then he stood, straightening the suit I had bought for him. He walked onto the stage, calm and steady. With his hair neatly combed and his intelligent eyes behind his glasses, he looked handsome, reliable, and every bit the equal of anyone in the room. The audience erupted in another, even warmer round of applause. Holding Alex's hand, I bowed slightly. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, falling on us, wrapping us in a warm, golden light. It felt like a blessing, a benediction on the new life we had built. The past was finally, definitively, behind me. The celebration ended in a buzz of conversation and congratulations. Alex and I were surrounded by well-wishers, students asking for advice, and university officials pressing their business cards into our hands. We were slowly making our way toward the exit when a figure detached itself from the shadows of a pillar and blocked our path. It was Liam. He looked even more haggard up close, his eyes bloodshot, his chin shadowed with stubble. The faint, sour smell of alcohol clung to him. "Lena," he said, his voice rough. "Can we talk? Just for a moment." Alex immediately stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of me, his posture protective but not aggressive. "Mr. Chin," he said, his tone polite but firm. "I don't believe there's anything left for you and Lena to discuss." But Liam ignored him, his desperate, pleading gaze fixed on me. "Lena, please. I know I wronged you. I know that. But you have to understand I had my reasons back then. Things with Isabella. It wasn't what you thought. It was a scheme, a complicated situation." "A scheme?" I looked at his weary, defeated face, the face I had once loved so foolishly, and a cold, mirthless laugh escaped my lips. "A scheme, Liam? Even now, after all this time, you're still making excuses? Was going to the supply co-op with her to buy contraceptives also part of this grand scheme of yours?" The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly gray pallor. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his arguments crumbling to dust in the face of that stark, ugly truth. The reality of those days was a chasm between us that no excuses could ever bridge. We both know the truth of what happened, I continued, my voice calm and final. I have no interest in revisiting the past. I'm living a good life now, a happy life. I suggest you focus on taking care of your own. I took Alex's arm and made to move around him. Damn you, Lena's song. A shrill, venomous curse cut through the air. I turned to see a heavily pregnant young woman storming toward us, her face contorted with rage. It was Maya Chin. The years had not been kind to her. The spoiled prettiness of her youth had coarsened into a sharp, weathered harshness. She was dressed in cheap, garish clothes that strained over her swollen belly. Haven't you ruined our family enough? Now you come back here to flaunt yourself and seduce my brother all over again. Behind her, walking slowly as if in a trance, was Isabella Rossi. The transformation was even more shocking. The delicate porcelain doll was gone. Her face was sallow, her hair dry and brittle, her body lost inside an ill-fitting faded dress. Her eyes, once so skilled at producing pitiable tears, were now hollow and utterly numb. Only the faintest ghost of her former features remained. Maya, shut up. Liam barked, a flicker of his old authority returning laced with shame. But it was too late. Maya rushed at me like a deranged animal, her hands clawed as if to tear my face. Alex moved swiftly, shielding me completely and catching her wrists, holding her at bay with firm restraint. Madam, control yourself, he said, his voice cold and authoritative. Control myself. She's the one who needs to be controlled. Maya shrieked, struggling against his grip. It's all because of her. This cursed woman. Ever since she left, nothing has gone right. My brother failed at his job and drinks all day. That sickly burden, she jerked her head toward Isabella, sucked us dry of money and still couldn't even give him a son. And now you're back here all high and mighty. Do you want to see us all dead? Her words were a torrent of vitriol, a lifetime of bitterness and blame spewed outward, never once turned inward. Then Isabella, who had been silent, slowly lifted her head. Her hollow eyes fixed on Liam with a look of pure, undiluted venom, then shifted to me and she let out a harsh, hysterical laugh. Lena's song, she rasped, her voice devoid of its former musicality. Do you really think you've won? Do you think you're so glorious? Let me tell you something. Liam never loved you. He used you from the very beginning. He was with me because of my father's research manuscripts. Those papers that earned him his position, his title, they were all copied, stolen. He's a fraud. The accusation hung in the air, sharp and deadly. Isabella, you're talking nonsense. Liam roared, his face turning a terrifying purple. He lunged forward to cover her mouth. But Isabella, with a strength I didn't know she possessed, shoved him away violently. Nonsense? Dare you deny it, Liam? Dare you look anyone in the eye and say those papers were your own work? You're a hypocrite. A pathetic, shameless little man. Smack. The sound of Liam's open hand striking her face was like a gunshot in the hallway. Isabella staggered back, a trickle of blood seeping from the corner of her split lip. She stared at him not with pain, but with a final, devastating triumph, before her body crumpled and she began to sob great, ragged, broken sounds. The scene was a nauseating spectacle of mutual destruction. Alex tightened his arm around me, his body a solid wall between me and the chaos. Let's go, he murmured softly in my ear. We walked away, stepping around the wreckage of their lives. Liam made an aborted movement as if to follow, to plead one last time, but when his eyes met my cold, dispassionate gaze, all the fight went out of him. He slumped against the wall, a broken man surrounded by the ruins he had created. Behind us, the sounds of Isabella's sobbing, Maya's furious curses, and Liam's ragged shouts blended into a single dissonant symphony of despair. I didn't look back. The sunlight outside the building was brilliant and clear, but I knew some people would forever remain trapped in the shadows they themselves had cast. We didn't stay in the region any longer than necessary. The ugliness of that final confrontation had left a bitter taste, but it had also, as Alex predicted, brought a definitive sense of closure. The ghosts of my past had been exorcised, not with a bang but with a pathetic, unraveling whimper. They were no longer formidable villains in my story, just pitiful figures reaping the consequences of their own choices. Back in our city we held a simple, warm wedding. We didn't need grandeur. We invited a handful of our business partners, a few close friends from the night school days, and of course Uncle Fong and Auntie Lon, who made the long journey, their faces beaming with pride and happiness. At the ceremony held in a small sunlit garden, Alex held my hands tightly and made his vows. His voice was steady, his eyes full of a love so deep and sincere it made my own eyes swim with tears. Looking at him, feeling the solid warmth of his hands in mine, I was filled with a profound, quiet happiness and a peace I had never known was possible. After the wedding, we used our savings to put a down payment on a bright, spacious 3-bedroom apartment. It wasn't a mansion, but it was a home we had built with our own hands, a sanctuary filled with light, books, and the quiet hum of contentment. Alex's grandmother, a sweet, gentle woman with eyes that crinkled when she smiled, came to live with us. She treated me like her own granddaughter, and her presence filled the house with a nurturing domestic warmth. With her taking care of the home, Alex and I could pour our energy into New Dawn Foods with renewed focus. The business continued to thrive and expand. We diversified our product line, adding dried fruits, specialty teas, and honey. Our small factory grew, requiring a larger workforce and more sophisticated equipment. We not only secured a firm foothold in the domestic market but successfully broke into more demanding markets in Europe and North America, our rustic yet quality brand proving to be a winning formula. I never forgot my roots or the kindness of Uncle Fong. I invested a significant sum back into my home village, funding the construction of a modern climate-controlled mushroom cultivation base. We brought in agricultural experts, provided new strains, and taught the villagers advanced techniques, effectively lifting the entire village's economy. I also established a scholarship fund in my parents' name, ensuring that bright children from poor families, especially girls, could get the education they deserved. The way the villagers looked at me had completed its evolution, from initial pity to envy and now to genuine gratitude and respect. I had not only changed my own fate through sheer will and effort, but I was also using my success to change the fates of others. I had reclaimed my dignity 100-fold. News of Liam's family occasionally trickled back to us through Grandma's chats with her new friends in the city. It was a grim epilogue to their story. After the university confrontation, Liam's relationship with Isabella completely collapsed. The plagiarism accusation, even if not formally proven, had irreparably tarnished his reputation. Whispers followed him, and combined with his apathetic performance, he was pushed to the sidelines at work, his career prospects dead. He took to drinking heavily. Isabella, struck by Liam and sinking deeper into depression, had a full mental breakdown. She would often babble nonsense or fly into violent rages. Eventually, a fed-up Liam sent her back to her family, who, resentful of the burden, reportedly turned her away. She vanished not long after. Some said she had gone mad and became a wandering beggar. Others claimed she had drowned herself in a river. No one knew for sure. Maya gave birth to a son. But her husband, a local Enirwell, was lazy and addicted to gambling. After the baby was born, he fled the county to escape his massive debts, abandoning Maya and the child. With nowhere else to go, she was forced to return to Liam. But Liam's life was a shambles. Drunk and embittered, he took out his frustrations on Maya and the child, their home a pit of misery and violence. Whenever Grandma relayed these stories, she would sigh. What a pity. A good family ended up like that. I would listen, my heart remaining calm. There was no schadenfreude, only a distant, sober acknowledgement. Everyone must bear the consequences of their own choices. Their fate was a tapestry they had woven with the threads of their own deceit, laziness, and cruelty. I was profoundly thankful I had found the strength to leave, to choose a different path. Thankful I had met Alex. Thankful I had not allowed their poison to forever taint my own heart. My life was full. My business thrived. My home was a haven of love and peace. And a year after our wedding, Alex and I were blessed with a daughter. We named her Aurora, to commemorate the new dawn she represented in our lives, the beautiful light that had followed the long, dark night. Grandma doted on her, her health remaining robust as she helped us care for the baby. On weekends, we would take Aurora to the park to fly kites, or on trips to the countryside, her delighted laughter ringing in the clear air. Under the sunlight, with her chubby hands clutching ours, Alex's loving gaze meeting mine, and Grandma's kind smile, I knew I had everything I would ever need. I often thought of the Lena from my past life, the one who had wasted her youth in foolish waiting, who had died with a heart full of betrayal and regret. If she could see me now, she would surely rest in peace. In this new life I had not only lived brilliantly for myself, but I had also come to understand the true meaning of happiness. It doesn't depend on anyone else's promises. It doesn't come from waiting for rescue. It rests firmly in your own two hands. It is created through relentless perseverance, guarded by wise choices and multiplied by the love you choose to give and receive. The road ahead was still long with its own challenges and joys. But I knew with a certainty that felt as solid as the earth beneath my feet, that as long as I kept love in my heart, hope in my eyes, and continued to walk forward with steady steps, I would always be walking in the light. My new dawn had broken and it was here to stay. The end.